one factor and all this stuff about what we now call culture and whether you really love your job and the people you work with, that's underestimated. I chaired a few groups with smaller company CEOs and go, how fast should I grow? And the boring fact that we know now, but if you think about it, that actually dictates a lot of that is the ownership structure. If in your business, I don't know when you started off, did you have external shareholders? But
Never, no.
but if you say you had, I don't know, many people, say you had 40 people and it's great, and I know you inherited the business and
Mm,
you probably had a very positive culture of respect or whatever,
mm,
and you're doing it all there. If somebody comes in and says, look, as you say regarding IPO, if somebody says, and you say, I want to grow quickly, and somebody says, well, there's €1 million, I'll take, I don't know, 10% of your business. I mean, the business changes. It's just natural. It's not a bad thing. But now you've got, if you invest in a company and you put €1 million in a company, you care about culture a little bit, but
yeah.
you care more about getting your money back, ideally with a return.
Adie McGinnis, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Great to be here, Paul. Good to chat to you.
Likewise, Adie, without doubt, you're a very, very successful entrepreneur. You have built one of the most successful and biggest recruitment companies in Ireland, Sigmar Recruitment, basically starting from nothing and building it up to the company is now at tens of millions of revenue. So that's an extraordinary achievement in anyone's books. Now, I've known you probably for 8 or 9 years, and most of our conversations have usually been struggling up a hill somewhere on our bikes.
I'm
Maybe
struggling. You're all right.
we're both struggling. You're keeping me focused away from the pain. We're struggling up a hill, either in Wicklow and Kerry or all over Europe. We've done it, and if anyone asked me to describe you, I'd say a few things. You may disagree with these, but these are what I'd say. I'd say you're very humble. Um, I'd say you're very humble. I'd say you're very generous, and I'd say you're very caring. And that's been my impression of you over a decade. And the reason I mention that is kind of because it's kind of opposite to what people expect from trailblazing entrepreneurs and people who scales multi-million-euro business. You're supposed to be, a fighter, a killer, So it's slightly, so you've a different personality in that, which I love about you. But last week we were at dinner together in the Shelburne Hotel, and you were speaking, and you said something that really caught my attention. When you're speaking about the early days of Sigmar, you said that you said you didn't know what culture was, because this was 20 odd years ago. And you said nobody mentioned culture, like it's a buzzword now. You had no idea, you'd never heard culture, but you just, on a human level, you just cared for the people in your team, and you cared for the people that worked for you. And so to me that makes you kind of unusual as an entrepreneur and quite extraordinary. So that was really, what interests me about talking to you. So anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. Can we go back to the very, very beginning, to where this all started for Adie McGinnis, how you've ended up living the life you've lived, and building the business you've built? So take us back to the very, very early days when you were a wee lad in Walkinstown.
When I was a wee lad in Walkinstown, yeah, loved football. I mean, as opposed to those, you've probably heard this before. I'm not mad about the word entrepreneur. Different people have different connotations, and I know people that like sold stuff and wrote computer programs in their teens, and they sold them on cassettes, those cassettes,
Yeah.
games, or people went out and made I did make sandwiches at one stage, but that real, they can invent something, they'll turn something.
Yeah.
I honestly, I mean this, I'm not being false, but I was lucky to be in a situation a few times where there was a leadership role in an organization, and I was there, with really good people around me. So I'm certainly not going, I invented this or did this, So because one of the things I heard some of your previous speakers talking about entrepreneurs, a lot of them take pride, and rightly, and saying that they weren't all that into school and academically. I was academically, boringly pretty good, and my
You're a
mom was a
trailblazer. I said in the outset.
yeah, my mom was a teacher, so I went. she's still alive. My mum, she set up the school in Crumlin Hospital and was there for 40 years. She was a trailblazer. So
Mm,
I went to school on my fourth birthday, which is December. So most of the guys, I would have been three and a big bit, you know what I mean?
mm,
So I was always the youngest in my class going to St. Peter's in Green Hills, Dublin 12. And I loved it. I probably should have been bullied more. I loved it. I was good at football. I love football. I was small, but I wasn't bad and loved sports. And I say this to people, Paul, I don't know what you think about this. I know there's a lot you do talk about. I had great teachers. And a personal thing of mine is the impact of great teachers, particularly in primary school. I nearly do a study on people and ask them what their teachers were like, because I
mm,
know people that didn't have good teachers,
mm,
and obviously in those days there was a lot of bullying and corporal punishment, nothing too bad.
mm,
But if you had like really good teachers, it just, I don't know, created a lot of opportunity, just gave you a lot of space, to do stuff.
mm.
So I my recollection, I think we all do, is I loved childhood. Went in then to Templeow College. I was 10 when I did the first exam because I was young, and I just had to stay back a year because they said they wouldn't let you in to secondary school at 11. And I was no child prodigy. I just happened to be at that age, and again a great bunch of friends around me, just really lucky on all fronts. And again, did well academically in Templeow. Enjoyed it. Didn't play rugby really. I played it the odd time, but as a rugby playing school. But a lot of good friends, and just got interested in life and the universe, and then went into engineering in UCD. Maybe because I had the points at the time. I was good at maths, and my dad had engineering in UCD. Probably like a lot of people, no real regrets, but you didn't consciously think, is this something I want to do? Um, and then I did start having the crack, having been good academically, then you go in, and I was still young. I mean, I was like 17, 18, and met some great friends who still are. And we were based in Merrion Street, where the Taoiseach lives now. And if you weren't in Merrion Street, we're in Earlsford Terrace. So the pubs around O'Donoghue's and Toners around Bagot Street, where I work now, I've probably been going to for, geez, I'm old, for like 40 something years. But anyway, so look, did engineering in UCD, like most people in the late 80s. I don't know what your experience, just weren't that many opportunities in Ireland. I got my degree, which is a good degree, but so did 250 other people. And a few of us went to London. It's funny the way people start going back to London now. Just recently, one of my kids in London, I think one of yours might be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My son Sam's in London. Yeah.
Yeah, and because it's sort of gone through the whole thing about Canada, Australia, US, and London seems fashionable again. And I did well with London. I worked with Ladbrokes. I was there for about 2 or 3 months, living with a friend of
Strange
mine.
choice for an engineer to go and work in Ladbroke.
Yeah, well, it was the first job I got, and I actually did well. And it was just, I'll do this for an income. And
Yeah.
I was like 23, 24, and they really fast tracked me. I was good. And they, in fact, recruiting was one of the things I did. So I worked there for 3 years, and I was the youngest supervisor, like district manager. In the area that I was there, but I loved it. I loved the job. It was good crack, good people, eye opener for me. It was a big corporation, so you didn't really, even though I used to say I was looking after an 8 million business, because that's what my shop's turnover, including sort of staffing and people issues. And I suppose that did get me into what we call management, which is a very broad term. So loved it. And then Fiona, who's now my wife, was over, and she's a psychologist, and we decided we'd come back. So she came back to finish her master's. And I said, I'll come back, and we'll get some job and do something. Like, I don't know, the world is at your oyster, even though the market wasn't great. I never remember worrying about careers. It was never going to be in Ladbrokes. And I fell into recruitment, as a lot of people did, literally looking for a job and going, I can do this, insultingly low
Mm.
basic salary. I worked for the company. The two lads might listen to this at some stage, called Interstaff Brackets Ireland Brackets Limited. And of course, I'm so
Catchy
naive. I'm
name.
going, yeah, but this is like Interstaff Ireland. This is like part of an international. So it was two guys in a little office off Bagot Street again,
That was when
and
you learned branding.
branding.
Branding
Yeah.
is everything.
And I told somebody recently, if we really want to get boring, the guys that were in recruitment or were around that day, or even you'd recognize this, our tool was that we put an ad in the Sunday the Irish Independent on Thursday, recruitment day, or the Irish Times on a Friday, and you didn't have a big budget, so you were literally given characters. Say you were given 100 characters, so you put in A S/W software engineer, circa at the time probably 18k, C 18k. So you're playing with characters. We
Yeah.
put in things like top co top blank co dot. That's your selling of the job.
The
These
top
days,
company, basically.
top company. So
Yeah,
rather
yeah,
than
yeah.
rather than now, we've got people that will literally create a video for every job they get on, and
Yeah.
they'll talk to them, and they'll put it on LinkedIn, or put it on Indeed, or they put it on other platforms, and they'll have a video for every job, and have a history of the company and the role and where it fits in, a 3-page spec. Also,
Not in the 80s.
and what do we put in? Topco,
That
and
was it.
yeah,
Take it or leave it.
take it or leave it. So I have to say I loved it straight away. I mean, you had an impact on what you could do yourself, and it wasn't a real hard sell at all, and it was like embryonic. The industry was certainly the nascent part of the industry in Ireland. I didn't understand what it meant. I mean, again, we forget what we forget. In 1991, I came back. It was the World Cup. I come back for the World Cup games. It just came back for good, and I go, hold on, these companies are paying us a fee because unemployment had always been high in the history of
Yeah.
Ireland. So if your company, say, was recruiting a sales guy, you think you'd do them a favor by saying, will you take on these guys? And you're paying us, hold on, 15% of the first year's
Mm-hmm.
salary. So the salary could be at those days, say 20 grand. We're getting a fee of 3 grand, and getting commission on that. Uh,
For
so
sticking an ad in the paper with a few characters.
now we did qualify, and I've come to
Of
believe
course,
that
I'm not.
we're great value now because you see the
Of
other
course.
people, you see other other professional services and what they charge for what they do.
Was it different back in the 80s? I mean, because I started work in the 80s as well, and it was like if you got yourself a job, it was a privilege. I mean, to think that you managed to get yourself a job, you were delighted. Your parents were delighted. You had a few quid coming in. That I think that shifted in 40 odd years. Now people are doing you a favor if they'll consider working for you.
Huge time. It's like whatever JFK's thing was. Who's doing who a favor? Basically, if you're working for somebody, but not just were you blessed to get a job. Even if you were good, if somebody helped you get a job,
Yeah.
if I helped you get a job,
Mhm.
you'd be going thanks, and they'd be going thanks. But like to charge a fee for it,
Mm.
but then pretty quickly what happened, and like luck or whatever it is, serendipity plays a big part in all this. Like the market started to grow up. The US multinationals, particularly in Ireland, Microsoft, Digital at the time, but also IBM, Pfizer that are still here, started to ramp up. And then it did get competitive. And then there was like a cottage industry called recruitment. The biggest recruitment company, I said this in the thing last week, and people had no more than, I'd say, 12 staff in the history of Ireland up until then.
Yeah.
So we had interstaff, then it was taken over. But this guy bought the name Marlborough, and we started Marlborough
I
Interstaff.
remember Marlborough Recruitment.
Yeah, well, there was a previous Marlborough that went under,
Okay.
and then Marlborough. So we started then in 1993 as Marlborough Interstaff. But he had some cash which nobody had. I mean, not huge money, but nobody had.
Mm.
We were coming into a growing market. We had belief, and I mean, again, I'm not egotistical. I am actually humble, but like I did the first couple of placements, hired the first few people, hired the second few people, and we just used the money to grow organically. So fast forward 1993 to 1997, we then had 200. The biggest up to 1993 was like 12. We
Mm.
had 200 staff, 200
Wow.
consultants. It
So
was
were you the only one in Ireland at that stage, at that
well,
scale?
no, we grew quickly. I mean, CPL, I've got a lot of time for them being
Yeah.
extremely successful, way more successful than Marlborough was or that I've ever been. A great time for Anne. Uh,
But they do
they
something different to what Sigmar does as well,
yeah,
don't
they do high volume stuff, but she would have been saying to me at the time, "This is amazing." At the time, it was an amazing story,
they? Mm.
and then the first service company to IPO, so that was an interesting experience. Again, I was quite naive in the whole thing. I had a small shareholding in the business.
Mm.
Uh, I don't know, is PLC the place for a small cash flow business? I
Mm.
don't know if it's the place these days for any business, really, to be honest with you, unless you're huge, unless you're really making something very interesting. We need to get cash in,
Yeah.
uh, and you're going to get like astronomic growth if you get, say, the development right or get the
Mhm.
market right. I mean, this is always a boring business. You tend then
But
to
you
get.
take cash in, and you lose freedom. You lose
Yeah,
equity in the business.
yeah. Big point. You're dead right. You're dead right. And I mean, it went well. I think we launched in 1997 for 10 million, so micro cap now, but it was big money then. I
Mm.
think we hit 100 million, and we took on some debt. We acquired companies overseas. There wasn't that much control put into them. I don't think there was that much thought given, and you're just sort of on a roller coaster. But like
Yeah.
I was sort of
You were
operational.
part of the good old Celtic Tiger.
Yeah, and I was MD for Ireland. We always made money in Ireland, and
Yeah.
sort of look, oh, we're buying this company in the UK. Will you chat to them? And that's the integration. These days, people have like a 6 month integration team. It's just you go
Yeah.
over there, have a few pints with lads. They're grand. We get on well with them. They're doing well. But of course, they knew the game. They do their earn out of 2 3 years,
Mm.
and then they were dust. So then you
But
had to.
integration is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do in a business as well. Or did you not find it so?
No, no, 100% it was. And
Mm.
then do you integrate, as in do you really, really mesh
Mm.
everything in, or do you respect vive la difference? Do you respect the fact that it's slightly different and
Mm.
just chat at high level? So we worked hard at that, and again, I have a few other iterations where we did acquire companies, and I think we managed integration really well.
Yeah.
But can I say something to your point? I know you go on to your point and your very nice introduction at the start. One factor and all this stuff about what we now call culture and whether you really love your job and the people you work with, that's underestimated. I chair a few groups with smaller company CEOs and go, how fast should I grow? And the boring fact that we know now, but if you think about it, that actually dictates a lot of that, is the ownership structure. If in your business, I don't know when you started off, did you have external shareholders?
Never.
But
No.
but if you say you had, I don't know, many people, say you had 40 people and it's
Mm.
great, and I know you inherited the business and
Mm.
you probably had a very positive culture of respect or whatever,
Mm.
and you're doing it all there. If somebody comes in and says, look, as you say regarding IPO, if somebody says, and you say, I want to grow quickly, and somebody says, well, there's €1 million, I'll take, I don't know, 10% of your business. I mean, the business changes. It's just natural. It's not a bad thing. But now you've got, if you invest in a company and you put €1 million in a company, you care about culture a little bit,
Yeah.
but you care more about getting your money back, ideally with a return.
Yeah,
And,
because
and
you have a choice. Do I put it in the markets? Do I put it in property? Do I put it in the business? And you put it in there because you think you're going to get a better ROI than putting it somewhere else. That's the reality.
exactly, but if it's your own business, you can probably take a view on that and say, well, look, I'm doing some good here. It's a company, you're not doing
Yeah.
good, but it's a company that you can be patient with because you love the
Mm.
culture. If it's somebody else putting the money in, I'm saying, talking to these recruitment companies, and I love them. A lot of them are very good. At good
Mm.
times, they make a lot of money. At bad times, they can probably contract and control their costs a little bit. And it's not a yes no question, and it's not a who's wrong, who's right question. But I'm saying to them, if you had €1 million now, say you employ 10 people in recruitment and you want to really fast track your growth because you're ambitious, um, would you, if you had €1 million now, would you put it into the business and hire people? A lot of them would. And
Mm.
the reality is, the market, as much as anything, dictates where that's going to work or not.
Yeah.
You go
Yeah.
into a good market, you probably put in €1 million, you probably double, treble the size of the business, grow your EBITDA, and you look like an absolute genius, as happened to
Yeah.
me a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
You put it in, the market downturns. You might lose some money. You'll certainly be slower getting it back, and you'll have a few sleepless nights over it. And you're doing the best thing in the world. You don't take it on. Obviously, the other side, you don't take it on and say, look, I value our culture. I value the sanity. I value the enjoyment more than to take on external pressure, which gives you space to grow, but it gives you probably necessity to grow. And they're two
Yeah.
different things, aren't they?
Well, they are, and it's interesting because I chat to lots of business owners, entrepreneurs, whoever you want to call them, and there's kind of a few groups. There's the group that are hugely into scaling, and they have this big plan to scale. But I know lots of guys who we would consider, successful people, and they're probably in the, I'm going to say, 10 to 20 million
Yeah,
sort of brackets. They've built a really really nice business, and personally, they've worked hard, they've worked long, and they've a pretty good life. And they go, and they kind and I would put myself in that bracket, and they kind of go, well, I sure I could take on an investor, all this sort of stuff, but why? Because like, why do I want to? Why do I want to scale beyond this? Because I have a very good life. I have a decent amount of money. Like, what? There's nothing you're going to give to me that's going to make an enormous difference. You're probably going to only bring grief and hassle because I sell, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of my business. And now you lose the one thing that I believe almost every entrepreneur values most, and that's freedom. Because I know, like you, I'm cycling on the bike and I'm chatting to guys, and I just in general, and the biggest, not all of them, but most people who run a business, you go, oh, they're in it for the money, but they like money. But most of them are in it for the freedom because they want to do their own thing. The money is a nice add on to that, but most of us are doing it because we just like bloody well getting up in the morning and being the one who decides what we want to do. And personally, I am not willing to give that away for to double my income because why?
Well, I love your honesty, right? I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I think if your business has the scope and the space for growth, and you've got the people around you that can deliver that,
Mm,
for their sake, you'd be mad not to grow, you
mm,
know. But obviously in a controlled way. But I think you're right. The external pressures. I mean, you might already have external investors,
yeah,
and then they're saying, look, we've got space to grow here, we've come in because we've backed your growth, we took risk, maybe early stages of growth, now we want to start getting the return stuff, and that dynamic can get interesting, so it's often external factors for growth, and rarely people are honest as you are. Like I did a course, Leadership for Growth, which is an excellent course,
yeah,
happened to be funded by EI and ISE. I know you've heard a lot. I'm encouraging you to do it. I did it for sort of personal growth, and they talk a lot about that philosophy of growth. I know you're into your books, that growth mindset sort of
mm.
type of thing. Now, there can be a lot of bullshit associated with it, and you can get it carried away by other people's enthusiasm.
That's it. Yeah,
And I love your honesty, and I don't disagree with it. I think we're blessed to have it. I certainly wouldn't like risk the farm. I mean, if you were in development and R&D and you thought you were getting a cure for some type of cancer, you can't stop halfway. You can't sort of say,
I
look,
agree. Yeah, yeah,
I've got a tenth of a cure, it's going okay, and we're 10 million. You have to go probably a billion or nothing,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and then you got to look at fun. But business, like, I mean, I do know yours and ours. I mean, they're interesting, but they're not too exciting. I mean, it's
They're not
just
saving
it,
lives.
it's cash flow. It's good. It can be great. We do change lives. We used to say that we do get people jobs. We change
Yeah,
lives, and
yeah,
and even to the extent of, say, practical things, that if somebody comes to you, I'm not trying to put you in a position and say, look, Paul, I just want to spend a bit of time or a little bit of I don't know, fundraising because I'm involved in this community enterprise or charity thing, and
mm,
it's not going to be very onerous, but can I have the back end the company? I'd say mostly you would say yes. It's probably good for the
sure.
company. It's good for
Mm,
bonding. Honestly, in the company, I didn't do them all, but we've done a lot of that stuff. If you have to think about that and go, geez, I have external guys, and if we do too
mm,
much CSR stuff, they're going to be going, lads, are you just there having the crack, and are should we be making money? So, like, it's actually a really interesting point. And the point you kindly said about culture, I think you agree because you've been through the same cycle, that
mm,
none of us discussed, like the way companies do now, what is our culture and how do we define it? But and it is the cliche about the way you act every day. It's about smiling. It's about being there. Sometimes it's probably
yeah,
about helping people. Again, we would be known in the sector that we're quite tolerant if people weren't. Well, we're slightly more tolerant than others if people weren't performing, that we just go an extra bit. Sometimes it's not going to work out, but we do an extra bit, and we can show you examples where it worked commercially, just spending an extra bit of time with people. But we weren't trying to be like Little House on the Prairie or the Waltons,
yeah,
We would enjoy pints in the evening, and sort of have the crack, and maybe we wouldn't have had the space to create that lovely environment, because it is, if we had too much pressure on growth externally, so the investors we got were actually friends and family. Again, we wanted to look after them. They got 10 times their money. They got the ubiquitous quintessential
yeah,
10x,
yeah,
uh, um, but they got it a bit slower.
yeah. But then, isn't it true that, I mean, you know, neither of us are kids. Isn't it true that most people you and I know who have any degree of success, they got there slowly? Like,
Yeah.
when you look around to the people of some degree of success, most of them have stories of, well, you have, and I certainly have stories of several decades, and there's war wounds in there as well.
Yeah, and probably net, maybe we look back with rose tinted spec. Probably net, we enjoyed the journey, you know. I mean, people do say that, and if somebody said that to you when you're 24, enjoy the journey, you know, you go,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, just want to get there and whatever, have the freedom and the
yeah,
money and have the whatever. But honestly, truthfully, I can say I really enjoyed the journey. You know,
yeah,
there were some tough times, very few, not that many tough times, and
yeah.
generally good crack. And you know, we got some great people who, if you give them space, Robbie, my good friend, who set up Talent Summit and sort of drove Gateway to Europe, I mean, they're both literally world class initiatives. You know,
Mm.
Talent
Yes,
Summit for a small company has become the biggest HR conference in Europe. I know you're familiar with it.
yeah.
A lot of your friends, international TED talkers, speak
Mm.
at it. Talent Summit, or sorry, Gateway. We're going in a few weeks to Canada and to Europe and to US. Will be the biggest trade mission ever between Ireland and North America.
Which is a
Um,
great initiative, and congrats to you
great,
on that.
great initiative. But to
How many
see
trips have you done? Like maybe 10 or so at this stage? Is it?
10, yeah. A lot of it, the early stages after the previous recession, was about foreign direct investment, amplifying that. A lot of it now is just about bilateral. In other words, we've as many CEOs investing in Canada and
Yeah.
US. But to give people space to do those type of things, again, it comes down to, for want of a better word, culture. You know, to give
Mm.
people space. I know you. I know if somebody said to you, "Look, Paul, I'm only here 2 years, but I have a great plan about how we might do something a bit mad,"
Mm.
that you would seriously look at it, if not say yes on the button. You know.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I remember it's a lady. We've two businesses, and the lady who runs our data infrastructure business. I remember because she worked for me in biz dev, and I remember having breakfast with him one morning, and just realizing I had a gem in my hands. I mean, you just realize, oh my god, the talent this lady had, and she now runs that business, and but I remember when she took over it, her saying to me, Paul, I need 2 years to fix this because how my predecessor was doing things are, I'm sorry, but they're wrong. Because she could speak very directly to me. She goes, we need to change things. And she laid out 3 steps that it requires this, this, and this. And probably it will take me 2 years to turn all that around. And I trusted her as an individual, and I said, "Yeah, go and do it." And I know, I mean, she's done a phenomenal job. So now everyone looks at her with admiration of what she's done. But I know in that period of time, because particularly in a sales organization, when you're trying to develop new accounts and all this stuff, as you well know, it takes time. It takes time knocking on doors, and she needed me as the CEO at the time to have to trust and go, I know this is going to take time. So it's often when I've had challenges in the business, they weren't a quick turnaround. They required, and culture is that trust. For me, when you fundamentally know someone knows what they're doing, but you need to get off their back and just let them loose and give them the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, in so many ways, I think that's it. You know, like if you listed all the things that culture means, it's going to sound like one long
Yeah.
cliche. But it is respecting. I say, look, people centric doesn't sound very, but it is respecting the individual. You know, sort of through tough times and bad. Not unrelenting. Doesn't mean you're not
Mm.
tough with them occasionally. You know, like notoriously, we go away every year overseas for a Christmas party for 20 years.
Mm.
All sorts of HR people go, don't do it. I would probably question it now. We went into it with, but my point is, we did trust the people, and we'd every right to trust the people. We've never had an issue with it,
Mm.
and so we say to the people now, this comes on a legacy where we trusted the guys that go overseas. Always been good crack. People get on with each other. You
Yeah.
know, but we go for it. Yeah, anyway, so like so much of that is about trust on all different levels, and like if sort of friendships ensue, so be it. They don't need to, don't need to
No.
be best pals with everyone. It's nice, it probably they do in many cases, and even honestly, even things like relationships, I think there's probably, including my brother, I think there's probably been 4 or 5 people met in Sigmar and got married.
Yeah.
Again, we didn't encourage it, but if there's a good collective collegiate environment, it tends to sort of make life worth living, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think it all comes from the top because the CEO owner of the business sets that tone, and that's that when I said earlier that you care for people, I mean you fundamentally do as a human being. That's your nature. I think you come from that. You come from that place, and then I suppose you'll find some people deserve it and some people don't, and you'll shy away from the people that don't. But my experience is most people who you engage with in that honest, open, caring manner, majority of people return that in kind. That's been my experience. I know that the if I remember the story correctly now, as we move on, the success of Marlborough eventually came into a fairly big problem. Is that the
Yeah,
next?
so Marlborough had over acquired, taken on a lot of debt. Then September 11, 2001, the markets fell off. It was under pressure. Again, I'm not abdicating responsibility, but I was only involved in Ireland. I mean, most of the company then was most of the assets that we required were overseas. To be honest with you, the companies we had bought might be on a 2-3 year earn out. You know how to be.
Yeah, yeah,
So once they did the earn out, they were
they were
they
gone.
weren't they weren't London was a bit more callous, or maybe we were naive. Maybe we were naive. So yeah, you're down market. You've taken on debt. These things aren't performing. So it went into administration. So we set up Sigmar. We did have like 15, 16 people starting off. So in our sector, it was
So
fairly,
just not to slide over this. So
yeah,
Marlborough Ireland effectively then went into liquidation, and you
yeah.
were left with a choice to make of how you personally move forward. And on that basis, you decided to form Sigma and take some of the key people with you. Is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had actually gone, uh, and then it went under, and I had a few options, and somebody else. There was a few people talking about setting up something, but somebody approached me who had taken on a bit, who had a backer, and early 2002, he sort of said, "Yeah, look, we'll would you join me in setting this thing up?"
Okay.
So there was actually four of us in setting up Sigmar. Uh, and again, it was a down market. It was the start of 2002. I don't know if you remember, post September 11, the
I
tech
remember it
thing.
well.
The tech thing was still hurting, but like happened to us again in 2010, 2009, 10. Perfect time to start a business.
Yeah,
We had trust in the people. We knew who the good people were.
yeah.
We didn't need a lot. We were all willing to bootstrap. As I said, the word bootstrap we didn't use them because that's what everyone did.
But what else? What other options
Yeah,
were there?
yeah.
There
You
wasn't
weren't.
another choice.
Yeah, and we'd some good backers. We knew most of them. We'd some good backers, like small money. Like people putting in 50, 100 grand.
Mm.
And yeah, and then the market just. I mean, we had our act together. There were good people,
And
and
you'd been decades. Well, you've been a long time in recruitment at this stage. You knew the business.
we knew the business, but mainly, well, not mainly, but a big factor was the market turned up immediately. So we thought, we were, if you set up a business in ours, probably the same in yours, just things take time. So you'd be 6 months before you're profitable. Like we were profitable in our second and third month, and again using profits to grow. I mean, like it's not that we were stupid, but we didn't sit down with this big growth plan. But if the market's going well and you're making money, we just keep hiring people. We did have a plan. Um, so that was another. We're through the worst of it. Probably was tough going through it. That we're thinking we have to do something now. The market's not good. If I have to get a job somewhere else, probably likely I was going to lead up a new operation, and then early 2002, and then Sigmar grew really well. Great time, actually, really quickly, and great fun almost immediately.
Mm.
And then we got approached by a company called Newcourt, who were a bunch of well-financed other service companies, and they were just trying to get a bundle of companies. So we were less than 2 years in business, and they approached us. It suited us and our external investors to de-risk. One of our guys made it clear from the start that she wanted, if she could exit, as you know, is an emotive word, but if she
Yeah.
could exit fairly quickly, she'd want to do it. This is way quicker than we thought. So we were less than 2 years in business. They made an offer, gave us some cash. Then they IPO'd, and they gave us some shares in that, and again quickly initially, but they got involved in property and again took on a load of debt. Maybe that pressure about being a PLC, that pressure, external pressure that we're talking about, where would you invest in a small company unless they were getting 15, 20% growth every year? I mean, that's basically the premise. You're not going to,
Which is a lot of growth for small company.
which is a lot of growth.
Wow,
And it might be
massive.
okay year one, year two, but it's
Yeah,
like year three, it's
saying
like,
that, yeah.
yeah, people talk about conveyor belts and all that,
Yeah,
it's like,
but also in
and
the Irish economy, and we said this earlier. I mean, I have two businesses, and we're very much tied to construction, so we can go into any year with the best plans we have. And if commercial buildings and residential stuff is not happening, that's gonna impact our business. Likewise, we've had years where we're halfway through and go, it's not going to be a good one, and for whatever reason, we come back in September and we rock into the end of the year, and we kind of go, well, are we heroes? Well, we kind of did, like, we've done what we'd always do. And sometimes that delivers poor or mediocre results, and sometimes that delivers astonishing results. The market, when you're, I don't know, maybe it's different if you're a big company, but the market has a lot to do with that.
it does. And then people say, oh, you're falsely humble and you make your own luck and blah, blah. And I suppose just being smart enough to avail of a good market,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
being,
yeah. And
and
be
being,
ready. Have your
yeah.
business in a good position. Yeah.
And as you say, it's not lacking ambition, but to be humble, to be sensible enough to
Yeah.
maybe just keep things tidy if the market isn't good.
Like, humility, I think, is better than arrogance,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
arrogance leads you into the shitter. It leads you to trouble. Humility, maybe, I don't know. I think it's a better trait.
Well, there's a few people in Ireland that have had one big success and go in the speaking circuit and they're
Yeah,
talking a lot, and you'd feel like going, you never used the word luck. It
yeah,
was like because it went well, everything was great, and it could have
yeah,
been partly excellent. And a few of them, there's a lot that
yeah,
absolutely deserve all their stuff, and there's a lot of people that probably had that arrogance and they didn't go well,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
And
they're not speaking.
we don't hear them. But I mean, I don't know what luck is. I can't define it. But I think we all have to define ourselves as lucky, because there's the shit that goes wrong. I mean, I'm lucky with the opportunities I've had. I'm lucky with the agencies and stuff that we've ended up with. I'm very lucky with the people I've had. I'm lucky with lots and lots of stuff. Now, I suppose we all work hard and behave in a particular way to try and be lucky, but you don't control. Maybe you have some influence over it. You certainly don't control it, and you have to acknowledge on the other side, go, yo, luck has a lot to do with it. You can have a great business, but if in the wrong market and the wrong time, it makes no difference.
100%, 100%. And I mean, if somebody, I don't know what's going to happen with all these tariffs and stuff, but if somebody said they'd take I sold all my shares 4 weeks ago, right? A good run, all my publicly quoted, mainly
Yeah,
US shares. Now it was more the emotion.
yeah,
I didn't want that individual listen to the radio causing. I don't mind if
yeah,
shares go down, but not because he's causing it.
yeah,
But maybe it wasn't a financial decision, emotion. But like it's like anything. If you buy shares now and things just start to correct themselves, you're going to get a great 20% return this
yeah.
year if you invest in your business and that
Mm.
happens. I suppose, in fairness, though, you would agree, like sort of being sensible when it is downturning. I think somebody touched on this last week, and again, I thought it was interesting way of putting it. The goodwill that you're not doing it cynically, that you've genuinely
Yeah,
developed with your staff, that is tested and generally paid back then when things are tough. The story I did tell you, just to go forward, when in 2009, this is true, then the new PLC got involved in property, went under. The market again was sort of fucked, for want of a better word. And we forget, our market was down like 70%,
I remember it well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, your construction, you were the
Well,
same.
we went down 70%. We were down about 55%, but 55%, like, I'm not making 55% margins. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like if my business is down 55%, you're knee deep in trouble. I mean, and for us, it was huge. I'll never forget it.
No, we were the same. So 25. Then we're trying to buy the business because we honestly wanted to protect the jobs.
Mm.
But again, think I told you the story. It's actually been told honestly. Somebody went around to our staff knowing that we were trying to do a management buyout.
Mm.
We didn't have a lot of money to give the receiver, but we had to have working capital to see us through. There was no point
Yeah.
in half doing it. And it wasn't the money, although the money was helpful, but
Mm.
somebody went around to our staff who were about maybe, I'm guessing 70, 60, 70 people, or certainly key guys. and he came back to me, and I remember it was the evening, we weren't there in the evening, and he said, I'm up to 200,000. I said, well, he says, I've just asked the guys, how much would you put into the business? Like, I was nearly in tears,
Yeah. Yeah.
put 2,000 business, and we did put salary cuts. I think I misread last week when I was saying it. We took big salary cuts, but we asked people to take a 10% salary cut, because like you say, our margin couldn't cover
No.
the stuff. So it's just reality. And honestly, people were thanking us. I remember
Yeah.
we just got everybody together. Nobody deserves a salary cut. Everybody deserves a stable job. You can sleep tonight. Most people can live, as it goes, it was reversed within 3 or 4 months. Most people can live with a 10% salary cut when they're
Of course
looking
they
at
can.
in the abyss. And we did. We went out for a few pints and we said, right, feck it, we just have to crack.
Yeah.
And people were thanking us. And of course, uh, the salary cuts were reversed. People that put money in got a really good return, and it probably was a result of the goodwill that was developed, or the camaraderie between everyone, not just nothing
Yeah.
to do, not just about me. So yeah, so it does have practical benefits as well.
I think we talk about this in Kern for people, and I think it's well. Firstly, you either do or you don't. Like, it's either in you and it's your nature. You can't pretend it, because people smell a bullshitter a mile away.
Yeah,
But if
yeah,
you generally do, I've seen a payback, because I've people working for me a long time. I've people who worked through the whole 2008, 2010, and people who worked obviously through COVID. And in both situations, I saw a couple of things. I saw the company was challenged, but was stable. We were never going under. We were suffering, but we weren't sinking, and that we prioritized those people that had been with us in the business. We prioritized their jobs, even if they had to take pay cuts. But they knew they were still paying their mortgage. They knew we were going nowhere. I think that means a lot to people. But I remember going in, and COVID was kind of confusing times. None of us knew what was happening. And I remember being called in, my COO calling me in at one stage, because to speak, to gather everyone together to speak to them, and basically go, we don't know what's happening. So I remember gathering them all out in our warehouse one day. So I was standing up on the stairs a little bit, because we have to spread people
mm,
out, and
of
out, well, not,
course.
not outdoors, but an open warehouse, standing there talking to them. And I remember saying to them, guys, I don't know what's ahead, and I don't know what we're going to have to do. We're making a month-to-month decision at the moment. There's nothing is changing, but I don't know what next month's about. So it's basically saying, I have no idea what is ahead. I don't, will they tell us to close, or I had no idea. And it's basically going, guys, I haven't got a freaking clue what's coming. I haven't got a clue how hard it's going to be. New me or the company. So it's a pretty dire thing. I was going, but look, we've no debt. We own our building, so we're solid. But this could be tough. Anyway, I'm back up to my desk, and about 10 minutes later, um, I got an email started coming through, and I got a couple of emails in from staff that floored me. And the emails were, something to the, I should have printed them and kept them, and I
Yeah,
didn't. But the emails were something like, Paul, we know this is really tough on you, on me. We know this is really tough. We know this is really difficult for you and on the business. We have your back no matter what you have to do. And I'm blown away, because they didn't know they didn't know if I was going to say 5%, 10%. They had no idea what I was going to ask for. They had no idea, and they're going, Paul, we have your back. And to me, I was humbled by it, absolutely floored by it. But I suppose the thing about it is, you get that from people when they trust you, when they trust that whatever that you. I mean, I will. I'm sure you'll be the same. I will. I hate going to the people for pay cuts. I've done it a couple of times. I absolutely hate it. It is the last thing I will have sliced everything in the company, including my own
yeah,
pay,
salary. Yeah,
before you go back to people. And fundamentally, if people know that they trust you, and they know if you're asking them for something, that it's the last thing you want to do. And that loyalty from people, well, it's phenomenal in my view.
yeah, exactly. And it seems sort of fairly, you know, simple and unsophisticated as a mentality,
Yeah.
but you're right, it's the backbone of it. I mean, absolutely, like my wife, I think, saying to is Rhode Island's mental health policy, but part of it is feeling control, so
Yeah.
even the thing, even if it wasn't like the strong bond you had, even standing up and saying you don't know,
Yeah.
and one of the things guys said about us afterwards, and I do know was we were cool. Physically we were cool.
Yeah.
So people were coming in. I don't know if, geez, I don't want to sound like a complete outfit. If the kids of today understand the danger about unemployment, about not having a job, it's
Mm.
probably underestimated. But when we know people, thankfully, it happened to me, who hadn't worked for a while, and next thing, 1 month becomes 2 months, as you say, paying your mortgage.
Mm.
It's a stressful time. So
Yeah.
just being there, just being cool, just saying we're in control. Paul's saying he doesn't have the answer to everything, but
Mm.
we have a strong balance sheet. I don't even know what a balance sheet means, but I
Yeah.
know that we're strong as a
Yeah.
company. We'll get
Yeah.
through this. And if they go back to their loved one that evening and going, uh, Jesus, Paul spoke today. It's great, and we're stable. And they might say in the third sentence, "Oh, by the way, we're taking a 10% pay
Yeah.
cut." It's like,
Yeah.
Grant.
Yeah, because when the shit hits the fan, 10% pay, so what? Maybe we're not going to, I don't know, go out for so many meals or have that holiday, or we're not going to change
Yeah.
the car or something. But we're paying the mortgage, and I always say, and I mean it, that nobody works for me.
Mm,
Everyone works for himself. There's nobody gets out of bed in the morning to go, I want to make AD rich. I want to make Paul rich. Maybe you and I do, but
yeah.
everyone comes in there to work for themselves. And I hugely respect that from people. And then I go, it's my job to create an environment that when they get out of bed in the morning, to look after themselves and their families, that they go, working for Paul Ryan is the best place for me to do that. That's the environment I want to create. And so, when you talk about taking care of people, firstly, I think it is my instinct to do that. I think it's your instinct to do that, and it does sound simplistic, but the reality of it is, it's like, I mean, in that situation when you raise that 200,000 euro or pounds for the business, like, that's it's just an enormous endorsement. And obviously, as you say, it turned out to be a bloody good investment for them.
Yeah, and then the obvious thing was then we probably needed a million or a million more. But then you're going to external investors and you just say it just happened like this. You go, look, the guys have already put in 200,000. You go, job
Yeah,
done. That was it. Didn't even
yeah,
have to say anything else. Didn't even have to look at the figures.
because
Go,
it
the
meant
guys are putting 200,000 in their own business. I'm in.
yeah, yeah, exactly. What I mean, isn't that it? Isn't that the
Yeah,
bottom
yeah,
line? And
yeah,
by the way, it's not just you guys; it's the staff. Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's the people who. It's not just AD putting in the money; it's the people who work for you putting the money. It's a tremendous endorsement, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, no, it certainly made things interesting, and then of course the market turned up straight away again, and we
So
got to
you were
do.
lucky again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a good time. I mean, obviously, if you dwell at that level, I think we would have got through. We
Yeah.
just have to keep cutting. We didn't have a strong balance sheet. That's why we wanted to raise some money. We said,
Mm,
we look, we don't want to raise money and go under. If it didn't turn up straight away, we would have been okay, but it
mm.
did, and yeah, doubly good.
I remember, could have been in 2009 or 10. Our business is down 50%. We had a consultant at the business at the time. I'm going to say an old guy. He was probably in his 70s. Doesn't seem that old to me now, but times again. And I remember going out to one day. His name was Pat Smith. Maybe some people in Ireland know him, but sat down on one day in his offices, and he said to me, "How are things, Paul?" And he'd been working with us for a long time. And I started, on my response, I started going through the numbers with him, because that what he did. Oh, no, no, no. I said, I didn't ask you about the numbers, Paul. I said, I asked you, how are you? And I kind of went, how am I? And I said, I'm pretty damn good, Pat. He goes, how is that? I said, well, I said, because in the last 6 months, I said, we've hit the bottom. I said, it was like on the top of a cliff and we fell down. I fell to the bottom and I looked around and I go, actually, this is
Not bad.
this this is not, but this, and I don't mean financially. Obviously, it was hurt. I'm going, do you know what? I'm paying my mortgage. I'm happily married. I have great kids. I have a good family. I have good friends. Like, if this is life for me, I'm not in the Ukraine. You know what I mean? So I
Exactly.
mean, it's. I mean, we live in a very privileged first world society. And I think that was the realization for me. Going, if this is my life here, it's pretty damn good, and I'm grateful for it. And I think, not to get into the woo stuff, but that level of appreciation and gratitude for everything we have, I think so. I think it's enormously important. But the journey for you continued on then, because I think 3 or 4 years ago, and I can remember talking to you around the time this was happening. Um, Sigmar was then ultimately acquired by a very, very big French company.
Yeah, and again, relationships. Yeah, we did a sell side guy, did a buy side guy, but we spent a lot of time in relationships. First 3 hours, they had a broker in the room, and there was three guys. It wasn't very good for diversity, and we mean that we certainly should be doing. And there was three of us,
Mm.
and we were talking for 3 hours, and they were talking about their feelings and themselves and their family. And I'm like exactly like
These are the
you, very
brokers, or
blessed.
these are the French company?
No. They had a broker to buy a
Yeah,
company, so
yeah.
these guys are in for a
They were
percentage of the
connecting with
deal.
you guys as on a human level.
Yeah, yeah, but they were chatting, and then we stopped after 3 hours. And the brokers, we had a sell side guys, they were both on a big fee, and they're going like, "Would you get on with it, will you?" And
Do the deal.
but anyway, the point is, truthfully, Jesus, I sound like I'm becoming a hippie. We spent a lot of time on the
Oh, you
relationships,
are a
and
bit
not.
of a hippie. Let's be
No,
honest.
I am a bit. I am,
You
but
are.
but
There's no denying that.
yeah, but we love them. They're great. They're not a
Yeah.
PLC, and again, we've gone through tough times. We've gone through COVID together. The
Mm.
earn-out calculations can sometimes get tense. Really good guys, big ambitions. They're 2 billion. We've
Mm.
just bought in Italy. We've just bought in Netherlands. Again, it was a family business, and actually shared those stories multiplied by 10. They told the exact same story about 2009 that
Mm.
he's passed away. A legend, Jean-Marc, the owner of the business, got everyone together and said, "Look, we've a strong balance sheet. Nobody's going to lose
Mm.
their job," and basically had that loyalty for the next sort of 10 years afterwards. But yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. And I mean, just one point when we're chatting, we don't want to sound smug about being in small businesses that we can do these things, because people ask us in the talent business, how can a small SME compete with a big multinational, compete with a Google or a Meta or a Pfizer or an IBM? Because they can throw share options, bigger
Yeah.
salaries, fuzzball tables, nice canteens, basically
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
says. But that sincerity is how we can compete,
I agree.
and not always do it. But it's not sounding smug. I mean, big companies are big companies because they're big, and it's hard to do these things in scale. It's not like we going, "Aren't we so clever?"
Yeah.
Maybe in recent times, when the authenticity of the messages, particularly coming obviously from X and Meta,
Yeah.
uh, were shown to be very inauthentic, which
Yeah.
probably confirmed our suspicions. But I don't, we don't sit there going, "Aren't we great and wonderful that we're a small business?"
No.
There's small business and there's big businesses, and good luck to them as well. We need them. They're our clients. They're your clients. Our friends work there, and it's not like it's not like we think we have it sussed and they don't. They're just bigger.
Well, I don't. I think there's just something different, and I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, our business, it's a requirement to keep a huge amount of stock. That's so we will have millions of euro worth of stock, and we would be conscious of, then you have you're competing with a competitor who's $1 billion business, and their resources global. It's very different. So, um, our view has always been we can't be them. I mean, my view is that we own a small boutique hotel in Dublin. If you want to stay in a Hilton, they have a Hilton in every city and every across, and you know what you get when you go in. But it's not like walking into a small boutique hotel where when you walk in, they go, "Hello, Mr. McGinnis, how are you? Thank you for coming back." And there's just something small and personal about it. So what we focus is on being that boutique hotel in our business and having a huge amount of part. And I was listening to the guy who built Air Aaron recently, and he said one word is important in the airline business. He said one word is safety. And I thought that's really interesting. I thought, what's the one word in my business? I said, the one word in my business is service. So what we do is we take extraordinarily good care of our customers, because we can't compete with the big boys, but they struggle to compete with that. So it's just about at one stage I wanted to be like the big boys, and now I'm
Mm.
going, hold a sec, this is who we are. So let's just really be so good at what we are that it's very, very hard for them to compete. And they still compete with us, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So now you've stepped away from the business, and I know you get to ride your bike and go for swims in the ocean. What's life like on the other side? You're not quite retired. You're still chairman, but you're
I'm s-
semi-retired. What's life
yeah,
like on the other side of it?
it's great. Again, we're privileged. It has some. The point you made when you were talking about this podcast, Paul, I have to say, gets you thinking and going. That people spend all their life maybe building up a business, whether they own it or they're senior manager in it, and maybe sometimes work too hard in it. And
Mm.
like you, and blessed with family and all
Yeah.
that type of stuff. In fact, my mom and dad are still alive.
Yes,
I
I
can,
met them at your
I
60th.
yeah.
Amazing.
I consider myself one of the luckiest people ever born of mankind, but I'll tell you my full maths on that at some stage.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that it does make you think. I'm blessed to be able to do it,
Yeah.
and I speak to a lot of people. There is a business I'm half thinking about advising people come up to retirement. I've been advising them for years,
Yeah.
but this stuff about purpose. I mean, obviously, to stay mentally, physically, and socially engaged
Mm.
is something I think people do naturally. But now we know that's good for mental health.
Yeah.
But you think about this, and I bet you have, and you've probably spoken to other people. All the course you do over your life about training and leadership, about
Mm.
setting goals, having a vision, doing a plan, setting plans, and then all of a sudden you're blessed in your early 60s or 60 or even late
Yeah.
50s to say, right now I've got freedom. And
Yeah.
where does all the goal setting and all the rest come from,
Yeah.
And we all say, okay, we got to sit down and go, what are the things I'd love to do? And you're right, swimming and cycling. I use the word love. I do love to do. So
Yeah.
I do. I
Yeah.
do. I also golf and I
And
do a bit of
horses.
travel and horses. Yeah. And I own a
Yeah.
few horses. So I'm blessed, but I probably, and I have a few investments that I spend time with, but I'm probably not the only one. And it's harder, you're probably harder than it sounds to actually sit down and go, well, I do have some years left. And what do I
Mm.
really want to do with that? It is that be
Yeah.
careful what you wish for, isn't it? A bit.
Well, it is. Maybe I've told you this before. When I was 17 years of age, my last year in school, I went to a Christian Brothers school, and Christian Brothers are quite tough guys. I don't know if you know Christian Brothers, but
Yeah.
so I'm 17 years of age. It's, we've maybe a couple of months left in school, and our teacher doesn't turn in. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, so it's like 30 odd guys in the room, all boys school. And so 15 minutes later, it's chaos in the room. It's absolute mayhem. And anyway, incredible noise, screaming, shouting all in the room. The door bursts open, and this young Christian brother stand there, head to toe in black. This young guy, and he storms to the top of the room. And if you remember, that was the time of corporal punishment. They all had a
Yeah.
leather and to beat you with. Storms to the top of the room, and he roars at us to be quiet. And we become quiet instantly, because if these guys say quiet, I mean, there's no messing. You step out of line, you're getting them
Yeah.
beaten. We all just shut up immediately. 35 teenage boys looking at this guy, and I reckon we're in for trouble. Someone here is getting a beating, or we're getting punished or something. And he tells us all to close our eyes, and he takes us into a meditation. I didn't know what meditation was. You said you didn't know what culture was. I'd never heard the word. I was 17 years. He took us into a meditation, and for the next 20 minutes, I experienced the most blissful thing I've ever experienced in my
Well,
life. I never experienced that. I had never experienced anything like it. I've experienced it often since, never anything like it. And I touched something in that 15 minutes that was the most remarkable thing I've ever experienced. It was unbelievable. So anyway, remember going home the day going, I got to learn how to do this. And I went home. I couldn't do it. And then 2 years later, thankfully, my father set me in a course, and I was trained how to meditate. And I've told you before, I was 40 years ago. I've meditated every day since. I've been to India. I'm obsessed with it. But what that did for me very early on was I experienced that period of inner peace. And for the rest of my life, right or wrong, it's always been my predominant goal. I mean, am I connected to that place of inner peace? And that comes before everything. So maybe that's made me less ambitious than other people, because I'm going, well, you can give me 10 million, but if I lose inner peace, I have nothing. I have inner
well,
peace and I don't have the 10 million. I still have everything. So maybe it's made me less ambitious. But that's all. But that's always been my goal to experience of that. So thankfully, like you now, I now have. You mean I? It's not that I haven't worked very hard in my life.
hmm,
I have, and I've had very stressful, hard years as well. Because you need the resources. But certainly, so for me, in these years of having the time freedom and financial freedom, that's always been my priority. So certainly, like you, now I do work with some other CEOs who I think have worked enormously hard, have never known what inner peace is, don't know what fulfillment is, don't know what purpose is. And I really have a passion. Part of the show, but some other things I do as well, is to really connect people to that. Because I do think you get to 60 and you go, okay, I've done all this, but shit, I have a lot of time left, and I've a lot I can give back. And you know, I
Well,
think
that is amazing. I mean, that's brilliant. Fair play to you. You should do a podcast.
yes, wouldn't
That's
be good.
brilliant.
But you know what, Adie? Here's the thing: you've such a great story that as soon as I start a podcast, I'm gonna get you on.
That is brilliant. No, look, well done. That's brilliant on so many levels. I mean, I was just talking about the superficial, trying to find things to do, but to look deeper is something,
Well, you've
maybe
got
we
to
should
do
do
both.
consciously or subconsciously, like
You've got to
hopefully,
do both. I
well,
was lucky, but again, I was lucky. I was sitting in the classroom. I was lucky. I didn't, I didn't have the insight. I was just lucky.
yeah, no, but yeah, and it's the appreciation of it, isn't it? In the old days, it was like you work your proverbials off all the time. You're 65, here's a watch, now feck off. And people used to die within 2 years, and they didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they might go, this is an opportunity where I can drink and act a maggot or do whatever, which probably doesn't sort of help. But yeah,
What age
just
are your parents, Adie?
my dad's 92, my mum's 87, 88, maybe
So,
87.
so hopefully you have another good, as of 30 years in you.
Well,
And the
I don't
question is,
have the clean living life that you do, but anyway, hopefully.
well, genetically, your parents
Yeah.
have there. So hopefully, I suppose the thing is, how do we live those lives? How do we live those lives well? Live those lives and hopefully contribute to other people as well. Adie, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I think for anyone who's listened to the show, I think they're going to have taken an enormous amount out of it. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Paul. Really enjoyed it. Thanks a million. Chat soon.
Pleasure.